Welcome back. In the midst of another attack, another anti-Semitic attack, this time in Ottawa, Liberal MP Anthony Housefather, the Liberal MP, of course, from Mount Royal, has called on other Liberal MPs, 31 other Liberal MPs, asking that Canadians stand up against hate amidst this rise in anti-Semitism. Anthony Housefather is on the line. Anthony, thanks for being here this afternoon.
Anytime, Aaron.
You know, it's one of those things where you have to use the word again, because this has happened before. It continues to happen. I know a lot of people are simply asking, why doesn't the government or why don't authorities, when people are caught, do more about this? So what's the nature of you asking other MPs to sign? What does this change, if anything?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. Number one, a lone wolf attacker like happened in Ottawa, there's nothing that any level of government can do to stop a lone wolf attacker unless that person had let people know what they intended to do, right? Or unless there was some suspicion that required that grocery store to be defended in a different way than you normally have a security at a grocery store. Like lone wolf attacks, we have to be honest, governments can't stop it. But what can be stopped is the normalization of anti-Semitism in Canada. The number of incidents, the increase in the number of incidents, the frustration and fear in the Jewish community, that needs to be addressed. And the fact is, they've had a couple of years where local police are not enforcing the laws at demonstrations, where people are yelling hateful things, where there have been encampments and anti-Semitic incidents at universities. And again, every level of government needs to do more. So these parliamentarians, we're reminding everyone, first of all, we're reminding the Jewish community that we stand with the Jewish community. We not only condemn these attacks, but we're reminding the rest of the population that they have a responsibility to speak out and stop these attacks. And number two, we're reminding everybody that Parliament, the federal Parliament, has already done the work to determine what concrete actions not only does the federal parliament need to take, but provincial legislatures, municipal governments, police, and universities. Because the Justice Committee report we delivered last December on the motion that I had done and the hearings we had that followed gave every level of government a list of items that they need to take care of. And so that's what this communication is. I know that in the fall at the federal level, we will be pursuing an agenda to amend the criminal code that will pursue the recommendations of the Justice Committee. I want to make sure that every level of government does it. I want to make sure that universities do it, that police do it.
At the end of the day, Anthony, with what you just said about enforcement, this seems to be really the biggest issue here. So you wonder in this case, and you're right, this is a lone wolf attacker. We understand that. But at the end of the day, too oftentimes, and I wonder, if people will look at this, if the same thing happens here, this person will go to court, will be charged, and will get a fine, a rap on their knuckles, and back on the street again. This has happened time and time again. How does that begin to change?
Well, number one, we need to make sure that the list of offenses in the criminal code is comprehensive enough to make sure that all of the criminal actions are covered. And that's why we would be introducing, for example, bubble legislation, creating a new intimidation offense for intimidating anyone that is seeking to enter a place of worship, a community center, or a school. But the main thing is enforcement. Most of these issues are covered already by the criminal code. And either police, in many instances, are not enforcing the law. They're trying to keep the peace and not enforcing the criminal code and municipal bylaws. Or alternatively, provincial crown prosecutors, because the crown prosecutors that are making the decision of whether to go forward or not are provincial, are not moving forward with the cases, or they're offering sentences that are more lenient than the criminal code requires them to offer. Like, there's a deeper understanding that needs to happen, better training of prosecutors, better training of judges, that these issues are especially heinous and deserve the most severe punishments that are set out in the criminal code, not the most lenient ones.
Oh, I would ask to that. That's all well and good, and I'm sure people are happy to hear that. But what is the actual federal government? What is the Liberal, the Mark Carney government doing beyond the signatures that you've gathered today to actually effect that kind of change?
But, well, again, we're amending the criminal code. Federal government, right? We don't control the local Montreal police. We don't have jurisdiction over universities and colleges. That's provincial. What we have done is the Federal Justice Committee has created recommendations for every level of government saying what you should do. And at a federal level, we will amend the criminal code to say that there is no way you can intimidate somebody from entering, for example, a Jewish community building, or leaving a Jewish community building. We should, and I certainly support this, and that's one of the Justice Committee recommendations, introduce legislation to say that you can't glorify terrorism, meaning you shouldn't be allowed to fly a Hamas flag in a demonstration without being arrested. We can remove the criminal code exemption related to hate speech where there's a religious exemption saying that if you carry out hate speech but you do it because of a genuinely held religious belief, then you have an exception from the hate crimes rules. But all of those are federal changes of the criminal code, but the majority of incidents and the majority of issues people are having are not the federal government issues that can be resolved by the federal government. The municipality, the agglomeration of Montreal, and all municipal governments need to make sure their police are enforcing the criminal code and municipal bylaws, and the provinces need to make sure that universities follow the recommendations set out in our report, saying, for example, they need to implement the IRA definition of antisemitism, that they can't let professors abuse their pulpit to say it's not okay to be a Zionist in your class. Like, there are many, many things that can be done, and they're all spelled out in that report that these MPs have endorsed.
Thing is, though, you're right. We've talked about this in the city, for example. These demonstrations, the hate speech has not been enforced. People get arrested, it goes to court, and they get dismissed.
But they don't get arrested.
Right,
many times they're not being arrested.
Okay, but even the ones who have been charged and actually show up in court don't end up with sentences that are, very severe at all and are back on the street a day or 2 days later. So what you've created here is a wish list. But again, as far as like a city like Montreal is concerned, it doesn't change anything.
Well, but you're asking me what the federal government, your question was, what is the federal government going to do? The federal government has the power to amend the criminal code. The federal government has the power to be clearer in its messaging. And I think Mark Carney will be far clearer in the messaging that not only are these crimes unacceptable, but prosecutors need to charge people appropriately with crimes. That is what the federal government can do, because you asked me what the federal government can do. We can't walk into Montreal and make the Montreal police do X or Y. Only the agglomeration of Montreal, the regional government, the Public Safety Commission, and the mayor of Montreal can do that.
So let me ask one other thing. We're going to run out of time. You have 31 people who've gone on and signed this. There's
32.
a lot more than 32. There are a lot more. Why have others not signed?
Because we didn't ask anybody else at the time. This is Jewish Caucus that was going to write a letter from Jewish Caucus, which is 6 Jews and 6 non-Jews that are part of Jewish Caucus. And then we realized we needed to include the Ottawa area MPs because the incident happened in Ottawa. And then we just reached out to some friends over a period of, literally 12 hours and got their signatures. And because it was a timely issue and we wanted to reassure the community that we actually care, because people were claiming nobody cares, nobody says anything, we put out a statement on a Sunday morning and a long weekend. But the only signatures that were chased were on a Saturday of a long weekend, and we didn't ask the whole caucus to sign. We asked about 35 people, and 32 got back to us in time.
Do you hope, is at some point in the future, hope to have the entire caucus sign, or is that not?
Well, now what's happened is multiple caucus members have signed on, right? Multiple caucus members have gone on social media and said, I joined the statement. And so we'll try to figure out, Jewish Caucus will try to figure out now a process where we add to the signatures.
Anthony, I appreciate the time as always, and it's important that obviously this needs to be addressed. So I'm glad at least that something is happening here. Thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the time.
Take care, Anthony.
Aaron.
You too.
Bye.